Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Hello, we are back, and I want to just jump right into follow-up from our last episode, which was the very enlightening, lovely topic of treatment plan acceptance, and we got into insurance and financing options and all that yuckiness. And so I think for me, what I've loved about why we podcast and really why I work with you and pick your brain is we talk about a lot of things in theory, but then a lot of classes you go to, they throw out, well, you should do this and this and this. And I'm like, but where do I get started? And what does that mean exactly? So I was hoping we could really kind of make this a treatment acceptance for dummies, kind of like really break it down into like actionable items maybe, because I do better with that. Like if I know what I need to do, I think my problem is a lot of what we said last week, a lot of your tips and suggestions made absolute sense, but I'm kind of just stuck going, but now how do I do that? So for example, one of the things we talked about was training your team and like going back and going, are you having less treatment acceptance because your team may not be doing a good job with the financial discussions? Well, then how do I figure out if it's a team problem? How do I fix it? We talked about financing options. And like for me, I'm going, oh, shoot, we used to do this financing option and we quit doing it. Do I need to do it again? So what am I doing on Monday when I get back to the office? Am I, what am I doing? Am I going to my financial person and saying like, what am I, or we mentioned like looking into care credit options. Like, so then am I calling care credit? Like, I'm hoping this episode can be kind of some actionable items to get me started. Yeah. Because I know what I will do if we don't do something like this. I will bury my head in the sand. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to say, you know what, this will get better. People are probably just on vacation right now, and that's why they're not booking this summer, and this is going to get better. Or people are, I don't know. But somehow it's just going to get better. And I don't know. And I don't have a problem. So maybe even starting with how do I even know if I have a treatment acceptance problem or not? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I've got you to go and dig into that and tell me if I've got a problem or not. But for somebody who doesn't have you, how are we helping people not bury their heads in the sands because this is such a yucky topic? And we already have enough on our plates. So I will turn it back over to you. Maybe we start with insurance because that's the yuckiest of all. Like let's talk about that and then work our way into other tips.
Okay. I like that. And I agree with you. I'm very hesitant to assume that this will get better after summer. I feel like economically right now, we need to plan on this being a part of our foreseeable future. My guess would be, the next probably 18 months or so.
And this, quote, this being case acceptance being low.
Case acceptance being low. Mm-hmm. And again, I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But I'd much rather assume that I'm not wrong and we can get planned and prepared for it rather than 6 months from now we're like, oh crap, and I'm still here and now I got to deal with it and we've suffered for 6 months. So don't do that. Just assume that this is a trend that's going to be around for a while and then put some work to it. So you mentioned insurance. First and foremost, I would say you need to go and look at each of the plans that you're a part of. So each of the insurance plans that you're in network with, and you need to evaluate how much you're writing off per company. So each software program should be able to easily pull this information for you. Every software calls it something different, but you can pull, if nothing else, let's say your software can't do it, you can pull your fee schedule, your full fee schedule, and you can compare it with your top 10 codes from the Delta Dental fee schedule, for example. Okay, your pro fee code is...
Where am I going to find that Delta Dental fee schedule that I signed up for? I don't remember how to do that.
It should be in your computer system.
Okay.
It should be in, for you it'll be Dentrix. But your team should have loaded that fee schedule into the software. So you shouldn't have to go and ask Delta for it. You shouldn't have to go back and look to some paper that they sent you. It should be in your software. If it's not, then you will have to reach out to Delta or whoever for that fee schedule. which they will say they are going to get to you, and they will never send it, and you will have to follow up multiple times. When I say you, I mean you, or task a team member with getting that fee schedule. But most of our listeners should have that in their software. And you can simply look at the top 10. You don't have to look at the whole fee schedule, which can feel overwhelming. Look at your top 10 codes, either your most frequent codes or the ones that are most profitable for the practice. Look at what you charge, do the simple math of this is what Delta pays me, and figure out the percentage that you're writing off. You can do that for each of the companies that you're in network with to figure out your lowest paying plan. There's two ways of thinking about how dismal an insurance company can be for you. First of all, the amount that you're writing off, the percentage, but the second is the volume of patients you have with that plan. So you may look at, let's just play in fantasy world here. You may look at Delta and go, oh wow, I'm only writing, I laugh as I say this, I'm only writing 50% off with Delta. And oh, look at Guardian. I'm writing 60% off with Guardian. Okay, so Guardian's going on the chopping block. I need to drop Guardian. You might only have 2 patients with Guardian, and then it has done you no good whatsoever. Whereas with Delta, you have 100 patients. So yes, you're writing off 10% less with Delta, but you've got, 100 times the number of patients. So you have to look at it both ways.
So that could be a good or a bad thing. Like that may stop you, go, wait, I can't drop Delta because I have 100 of them. Mm-hmm. Or it might be, no, I need to drop Delta because it's such a significant hit to the practice. And I do have enough in Cigna, Aetna, and somewhere else to offset what I might lose with Delta.
That is 100% correct. Yep.
So basically you're getting the numbers, and then you've got to figure out what you want to do with the numbers.
Yeah. And it could be, hey, I want to try to renegotiate.
How is that going these days?
No, it's not. It is not going. Very minimal negotiation. I have had some clients attempt to negotiate. One in particular tried to negotiate with Aetna. Oh, so it just clicked. We were having some conversations about Aetna, and Aetna did negotiate with them. That negotiation earned a few dollars more per code. It was literally like a range of $2 to $3 more, and it just was not enough.
What about these companies that I know, like Five Lakes used to be one? I think they're working more with bigger offices now. But companies like Five Lakes that, and I don't know what the other names are.
Unlock the PPO is another one.
Okay, and those are the ones that negotiate for you. What are your thoughts on those?
So if you're already in network and you want Unlock the PPO, for example, because I like them better than Five Lakes, Unlock the PPO, you want them to negotiate. I don't know that you're going to get a ton of bang for your buck because insurance companies are not negotiating with anybody, honestly. Where a company like Unlock the PPO comes in is if you are not in network and you are, not to the advice of Dr. Kuba and Bethany, you have decided to go in network with everybody. A company like Unlock the PPO can do a really great job for you because they can network you in a way where you get the biggest fee schedules. So they
like better than what you could do for yourself.
Absolutely.
But if you're already in, then the odds of them being able to help you much is
pretty low.
Okay.
Or
it used to not be that way, but that's where we are now.
That's where we are now. Okay. Yeah. I don't think it hurts to reach out to those companies, especially if you're like pulling your hair out with insurance and you're like, I don't know. I think I'm being reimbursed too low and I think I should drop somebody. Companies like that are a really good resource. They can do a full analysis and they can at least give you advice, if nothing else. So I think they're a good company to reach out to. But as far as investing thousands of dollars to get, renegotiated, I don't think we're going to have a lot of success from that. But you may get good information if they're just running an analysis for you. Does that
Depending
help?
on what the analysis costs and all of that. Okay, yes. So you were saying with insurance, first thing is to look at each fee schedule we participate with, see what that percentage is that we're writing off. Also look at the number of patients we have with each insurance plan.
Yep.
And then figure out
and then go from there
how
and make some
impactful those-
decisions.
yeah. Okay.
I normally recommend if you're in network and you're gonna start dropping, I recommend doing that very slow and methodically, which sounds counter to what we've been saying, but we don't know the impact on the practice until we start dropping. So it's too big of a risk if we're like, oh, we're in network with 8 companies, we're dropping them all tomorrow. As a consultant, I feel like that's too big of a risk. We don't know the impact it's going to have on the practice based on your demographics, based on how the team communicates about it. So I would say either a couple small ones at a time or one big one at a time.
And when you say small, like you're looking at, like, say in the case of Guardian, that we only have 10 patients. So we're probably not going to feel that hit, but we're probably not going to feel the positive impact either.
Correct.
If it's that small a number. The other thing that I was going to ask, when you say drop slowly, what are we talking about? A 3-month, a 6-month,
6
a 12
months.
months? So what are we waiting on to see?
6 to 7 months is what I normally recommend, because to me that's a critical time, because it comes back around to recall. And the people that right after we dropped came in for recall, and then did they come back? We can't really tell how many people we lost off of that drop until we come back around to the recall. And then when we get back to 6 months later and, little Johnny, who's been coming into us for years, decided to go to an in-network office, and then we just kind of keep a tally with Guardian. Let's say we dropped Guardian, how many of our Guardian patients came back for their recall appointment?
And when you say keep a tally, like, my mind goes straight to paper, pen, dropping, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. That's not what you're talking about. You're saying there's reports you can pull?
You can pull reports. In my opinion, the old-fashioned tally is the easiest. Yes.
Literally going in and...
So each day, what I would recommend after you drop a plan and you're getting to that 6-month mark, and this is going to sound old school, but it works well. Print out a schedule from that day. Highlight, I keep using Guardian, highlight all of your Guardian patients. And then you can evaluate, you can pull the recall list and evaluate, okay, who were my Guardian patients that were due, that should have been in, and ultimately didn't come in? Or on that highlighted schedule, which of my Guardian patients told me I'm not coming back because next time. So you just kind of, it's your snapshot in history. You use that schedule to kind of make all your notes about how those conversations went with those patients as you told them we were going out of network, or when we get 6 months later, how many highlights do we have on that schedule?
So I will just tell you that alone just makes me go, never mind, I'm not dropping. Like, it just seems like a lot of work. So is there another easier way, like just looking at collections, production, and making some assumptions and extrapolations, or no?
You can, but to me, in order to make more decisions about whether you're dropping your insurance, you really need to be detailed in the process. And I know that stinks, but if it means thousands and thousands of dollars more for the practice, I think it's a worthwhile amount of time.
Okay, well.
And it doesn't have to be you. I think that's the key thing. You can easily have one of your highly detailed people, like, hey, you are going to be my insurance drop coordinator, and I need you thinking about this all the time. Specifically, I need you watching this, 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 and this. So you can have somebody that's watching that for you.
If you say so. That just seems like a real nightmare.
So hindsight is a lot easier, right? So with MetLife, for example, I was able to pull a 6-month window for your practice and go, how many MetLife patients did we have during this 6-month window? Comes directly out of Dentrix. Fast forwarded to a year later, the same 6-month period of time. Okay, pull the Dentrix list. How many MetLife patients did I have? Okay, it's actually more MetLife patients. That's very easy, but that was done a year later. So if you're dropping insurance to try to do it consecutively, like in 6 months I want to drop another, and then I want to drop another, well, you can't. You got to do the homework now.
Okay, that makes more sense. So for me, then, that's where I would be. And I don't think we're in with a ton of networks, like, because we have that one that's, what is it, Carrington or something, that it's a big umbrella one, and then a couple of other random little ones. Yeah. And so we weren't planning on dropping anything major. Like, correct. MetLife was going to be a big one. Mm-hmm. Delta would be the next big one. Mm-hmm. So that makes, because I was like, I don't remember us printing and highlighting anything. I feel like I wouldn't have done it then.
No.
Okay.
You wouldn't have.
I wouldn't have. Yeah, you would have had to talk to somebody on the team to do it.
No, and your practice, I was not concerned about the drop at all. We had the volume that we needed. We had a good rollout plan on what we were saying to the patients and how we were saying it.
So I don't want to jump ahead here because I know we're going to do a bucket category of team training. And we may have talked about this once before, and don't shoot me here, but what is your philosophy and thought on, like, when you say the rollout plan and when you say is the patient? Because I know, like, for example, with us, when we dropped MetLife, we did not tell them ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And I know that's a highly debated topic.
Highly debated.
So what we ended up doing, because it made sense in our case, to let the patient go ahead, like they were, we dropped MetLife on July 1st and the patient comes in on July 7th, and now they're technically not in network. Mm-hmm. We did not tell them that on July 1st, hey, by the way, are you coming to your appointment? By the way, we're not in network. We didn't do that. We let them come in. Mm-hmm. And then we said, we're not charging you anything extra. So we did take a hit for a little bit there. In theory, it actually wasn't a hit because, say, MetLife was going to pay us $50 for a Profi in-network. Well, now they're paying us $80 out of network. Or let's even say $60, like 10 more bucks that they're going to pay us out of network. But what we told the patient was, we're not going to bill you for anything.
We're not going to balance bill anything.
Right. And then that way we kind of know what we're looking at. Come 6 months from now, when it's time to schedule your recare, then you can look at and see whether or not
you're going to have a balance.
Because we will charge you a balance at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what you're saying. Like a year later, those patients stayed with us.
Correct.
The only ones that were impacted more would be the ones who had to pay a portion of treatment, because that would have been different in network or out of network. Excuse me. But a significant number of those patients didn't have treatment needs, which is why we didn't lose a lot of them. They're like, oh, I still didn't have to pay either way. Fine, I'll stay with this practice.
Exactly. And a big asterisk on that plan. So it's my favorite rollout plan. It is usually what I recommend to any client to do it that way. And it works beautifully, except for Delta. So I'll come back to Delta. We have to handle that one a little bit differently. But with MetLife, what's great about that plan is then we're agreeing not to balance bill anybody, so it removes that risk factor. We're not changing anything. We're still billing to insurance. Insurance, in most cases, 95% of those cases, is still going to send you the check. So we're still accepting the assignment of benefits, the practice is. If we were, and I would not recommend this, if we were like, oh, we're done with insurance altogether, we're not billing for insurance, we're not waiting on insurance, we're done. You have to pay in full, and then you'll file for reimbursement. That you're going to have to tell them ahead of time. But with the way we were doing it with MetLife, with your practice, it was status quo. Nothing was changing, and they wouldn't even be left with a balance. But then at the end of the day, when we get that EOB and we get that payment, we see how much of a copay they would have had. And the patient himself or herself, or the parent in this case, also sees how much of a copayment they would have had. And so it's not that we're hiding behind anything. We did tell them in person, and we told them the plan. So it's not just like, oh, just assume that nothing ever happened. We did talk to them about it, but it was in person, and we had agreed for those first 6 months not to balance bill anybody.
So then does that buy you 6 months of time to go, what would have been their copay? Did MetLife out of network pay preventive at 100%? Because then it's a non-issue. But if they didn't, and the patient would have had a $30 copay, well, that could add up if you've got a family of 3 kids. The parent's going, wait, I would have had to pay $90. Yeah, maybe I'm not coming back to that office. But that at least gives us time to analyze what is being paid and what's not being paid, such that maybe we could at that 6-month mark go, we're not going to balance bill still. Because, yes, I'm not going to get the $90, but I already got paid more per Profi. So it made more sense to
retain the family.
So what did we end up doing? I don't even know what we ended up doing.
Are we balance billing?
We
do not.
But are we losing a lot of money on that?
Nope.
On preventive, because they're paying 100% preventive?
Correct.
Okay.
They're paying pretty close.
MetLife is. Okay.
And if they don't, there's a small handful of MetLife or any company you go out with. There's going to be a handful, depending upon the employer's negotiation of that plan. There's a handful of them that will pay dismally. Like, when I say dismally, close to what they paid in network, which is laughable. But you'll have this handful that you're just like, oh my gosh, they would have owed $125 on this cleaning. And so now, mathematically, when we look at your numbers in particular, or any of my clients, I've suggested a lot of my clients to go out of network with MetLife because mathematically it just makes a lot of sense, and they do a really good job out of network for now. So when you look at...
Much like last episode where I was like, nobody from Delta will be listening. I hope nobody from MetLife is listening, so that way they don't turn it on us.
MetLife,
it's working for us now.
I love MetLife.
I will not ever say those words. Those words will never come out of my mouth.
I don't love them in network, but I love them out of network. They're a very good company as out of network providers. So
it begs the question, why?
I've asked that for many years. And yes, please, God, don't let any MetLife person be listening to this. It's just this golden, beautiful, to me, and this is a shout out to MetLife, they function as a true PPO. A PPO is supposed to be you get to choose where you go without penalty. There is no penalty if you go in network, if you go out of network. It's the same coverage. It's the same preventative. Your maximum's the same. That, to me, is the definition of PPO.
But are they the dummies of the insurance world? Is Delta going, y'all are so dumb for doing this?
To me, they're the most ethical, but yes, from a financial standpoint, I don't know how they continue to do it, but I appreciate that they do. So, there we go. So anyway, mathematically, it all worked out for your MetLife patients because we were making enough off of the 90% of companies that were paying really well on those cleanings, or maybe they had a $10 or $12 copay that they would have had to pay to make up for the 10% that paid dismally. So we just have continued not to balance bill.
And you know that? I don't know that for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So where were we at? So, evaluate the insurance plans, track it. If you're wanting to drop consecutively and quickly, then I would say you're going to have to spend some time tracking. The only outlier to that, I've got a client that has a booming patient base, like 10,000 patients. It's massive. Ooh. And we have had a capacity issues for years. She can't expand. There's just not much she can do. She's added, days to the week. We've done everything we can to raise the ceiling, and she still has too many patients. With her, we were able to do a much more aggressive plan, similar to my client that dropped Delta because we needed the capacity. She was able to drop back to back to back to back and still has plenty of patients. So I would say if you've got a really large practice that you just can't handle, you can drop consecutively, and heck, who cares? Don't even worry about tracking it. Just drop.
I don't think most of us are in that boat, are we? Okay.
No, very, very few. I can think of 2 out of all my clients that could have done that. So most of us are not going to fit in that category, so don't assume that's you. I'd rather you do it the conservative route than the aggressive route.
Okay, so that was all the insurance. How do I... Okay, so I'm going to back us out here because I'm getting lost in the forest. So let's look at the forest. The topic was, how am I looking at treatment acceptance and all of those things? So one thing, and again, in the last episode, we talked about how it's counterintuitive. You would think you would want to sign up for insurances. Mm-hmm. What we kind of said last week was, no, don't do that. So if you're wondering why we said that, listen to last week's episode. But if we are trying to look and say, should we drop insurances? Mm-hmm. Then this is our playbook on the couple of things we need to be doing.
And how it plays with treatment acceptance is all about how we communicate about being out of network. So that's where
So do you want to jump into that bucket now?
That. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then that was the thing where last episode you said several times, it depends on, how your team handles it and how your team rolls it out and all of that. And I feel like that's where... how do I get started? What do you mean? Mm-hmm. And how do I get started? So if we could give me the 3 dummy tips of what do you mean by that?
Number 1 dummy tip, and this is kind of, it may be jumping categories, but it's going to be on team training, because your team is going to be the one communicating about an insurance drop. And we don't want this to negatively impact treatment acceptance. That's the whole point, is we're not trying to impact that negatively. So number 1 dummy tip with what to train your team on is I always say don't use the language of the enemy. The language of the enemy is insurance, by the way, the insurance companies. They created this language many years ago, in network, out of network. And it's meant to have a negative connotation. In network, this person's in with us. They've been approved by us. We like this person. They're quote unquote credentialed with us. They're in our network. Out of network, you are on the outs. You are not included. You're not a part of our club.
You didn't make the cut of credentialing.
You are not credentialed and approved by us, which is the language of the enemy. This is what they say. And I can talk about that personally as I went to an out-of-network provider and how insurance talked to me like I was an idiot for choosing a non-approved provider. Non-approved. So we want to make sure that our team is not using the language of the enemy. And the true version of whether we're in network or out of network is, do we have a contract? Are we under contract with Delta? Are we under contract with Guardian? Either we are in contract with them or we are not in contract with them. And that to me is better language to use. There's not a negative connotation to that. We can explain the reason that we decided to no longer be in contract with Delta, for example, is they were making so many rules and parameters that we felt like prevented good patient care. And we were no longer willing to compromise on that. So we broke our contract with them. And now we're still working with them. We're happy to work with them, but we're not going to play by their rules anymore. So it's very easy to take that non-contract or where we broke our contract with them and point to the reason for that, which does it sound dramatic to talk about how it's impacting patient care? Maybe, but it's the truth. It is the truth of the matter. We cannot function at the same level of patient care with that level of reimbursement. We either have to see 10 times more patients, which then impacts patient care, to make up for what's missing. We have to lower the quality of our things that we buy. It absolutely impacts patient care. Or down to, hey, you can't take that x-ray because you took bite wings on that day. Excuse me.
And I'll tell you, because I started trying to talk about those things and I realized most patients don't really care, or not that they don't care, but they don't really get it. So then I tried to make sure I was very concise with what I was saying and as dramatic as I could be with the verbiage I was using. So imagine me being concise, but dramatic. You could totally believe that. So I would say things like, yes, it was awful, like being in contract with them. They have all these rules that make it very difficult for you to get care. And we were tired of fighting for that. You deserve better than that. And we know we can provide better. So we just said, we are not getting into this ridiculous contract of y'all's. No, we're going to see our patients and provide excellent care without having to jump through all those ridiculous hoops y'all put in place. I wouldn't go into the details of the hoops.
Right.
Because the patient doesn't know, but they're looking at me, their trusted resource, who is looking out for the care of their kid. They see that in everything we do in the practice. And that's when I was like, it's not fair that you are stuck with certain limitations because I'm in contract with this company and that's what your employer chose for you. It was just getting ridiculous and y'all didn't deserve that.
Yep. That's exactly, like, if y'all can go back and just rewind with that whole minute, rewind it, because that is exactly how the language should go. It should be turned as we were looking out for you. And we got to get our minds straight on that, because it can feel like a very financially beneficial decision for the practice, and it will be financially beneficial. But at the end of the day, and this is like my personal vendetta, which is why I will not delete the section from the last episode, insurance is negatively impacting patient care. 100% true statement. And if we can break ties with them and still work, we've got shared children together, we'll still take care of the children, right? But I'm not going to be married to you any longer. Like, it's a dysfunctional relationship. And if more providers would pull out of that contract, it would force insurance's hand. And So when we say we had to break contract because they did not have patient care first, that is 100% true. Insurance does not have patient care first. And so we've got to get our heads straight and know, yes, it's going to be, there's a side benefit. It's going to be beneficial for the practice. But ultimately...
But then I come back and I say, but yes, so it is going to be beneficial for the practice, so that therefore I can hire better staff. I can take that extra money and send my staff to CE. I can give my staff some PTO so that they're better rested, so they come back and they're providing better care. So it absolutely impacts the patient's care. Absolutely. Maybe not in the way the patient might see it initially, but, you know, again... Who's going to get the better dentistry out of me? If I had to see 5 patients and you're patient number 5, or if I had to see 15 patients and you're patient number 15? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a no-brainer to me. And so if dropping some of these useless paying plans that I'm like, are we even making money taking this plan? You know, I just feel like that to us is a no-brainer, but seeing it from the patient side, when they're getting a letter that's saying, oh, you're going to somebody who's not approved, and you know, the patient is not going, I'm going to have to pay what? That terrible dentist. She doesn't care about my child. She's just looking at upping her bottom line. I've got to be ready to say, no, ma'am. They don't make decisions based on medical at all. They are a business. Mm-hmm. And so I was tired of dealing with their rules to try to work with their business. Mm-hmm. So I don't get into the nitty gritty of, because I tried a few times and then you can only imagine how unconcise that was. And then the question marks all over the patient's face. So quit doing all of that. And I just said, you know what? I couldn't be in contract with them anymore. The contract had so many ridiculous clauses that it was really not fair to our patients.
Correct.
We dropped that and now we're not bound by their ridiculous rules.
And I think that is the number one thing when it comes to training the team. They've got to be around that mindset. They've got to absorb that.
So how do I do that then?
Well, first of all, I think we have to have honest conversations with the team. I think, so I can't tell you how many times our front office team members, they feel personally bad for the patient that we're no longer in contract. They feel it's bad. And it comes out of a 100% purely financial, I feel bad for them.
Well, and they're imagining themselves in that situation.
Yes, I hear that all the time. If it were me, fill in the blank. So we've got to give our team time I would say, before you even mention that you're going to be dropping plans, bring it to the forefront. Look at this crazy new clause that they have. Can you believe they're preventing this? Wow, this is so heartbreaking that patients are getting this kind of insurance. You start this dialogue. If you've got a team that you know is going to struggle with it, start it months ahead of time. Can you believe, gosh, and then I heard about this. Oh my goodness, look at this article. I saw that Delta Dental is, the CEO made $1 billion this year. Isn't that so sad? Think about that $1 billion.
But then they won't let our 10-year-old get a Pano until they're 12. That is ridiculous.
So start that narrative. But sometimes the team is like, I'm done with insurance. Drop them. So if you've got that kind of team, you don't have to worry about this. But if you've got, sweet, sensitive Sally that just has a bleeding heart for every patient, start the narrative months. They need to see insurance companies as the enemy before you make a drop. And if you don't do it before, they are going to mess it up with the patients 100% of the time. They're going to make it into a really big deal, and then the patient is going to think it's a really big deal. And
think you're being a scam. You just dropped it for your own gain.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I sure didn't. Sure didn't.
Mm-mm. So that's what I would do. So I would say 2 tips on the team. Make sure they don't use the language of the enemy. Make sure they are mentally in the right frame of mind before you make the drop. They need to be feeling, unfortunately, a hatred towards the insurance company before making a drop.
So then my next question is, how do I know which of my team members are going to fall in which category? So then maybe have an hour team meeting saying, hey guys, looking at our numbers, would we start there maybe to say, this is what we're writing off if we are considering dropping insurance? Or for me, I blame it on you. Well, Bethany's mentioning this and they adore you, revere you, so whatever you say goes. But if it's an office that doesn't have a Bethany, would they say, hey, I was listening to this podcast or I was reading this article and a lot of people are recommending dropping insurance and then gauging your team's reactions.
So I would say that testing the waters without mentioning the drop. Because if you do have somebody that's super paranoid about that and you mention dropping insurance, the ones that are truly paranoid will stay paranoid. So I would instead test the waters with talking about a particular patient that got the raw end of the stick.
But how would I know that? Because I don't really deal with the insurance anymore. How would
That's
I know
true. That? I mean, hopefully you've got somebody on your team that's aware of the EOBs and the claims and what they're seeing from a trend standpoint. Maybe even like in this particular case, it would be your remote AR person. Like, hey, Renee's been seeing some trends with insurance issues. We're having a team meeting because I want her to break down all of the insurance issues that she's seeing and what all they're denying and why they're denying. And then you clue Renee in ahead of time. Hey, by the way, I need this. I need you to lay a groundwork for making sure the team understands how dismal it is from an insurance side of things.
Okay, so what about the team members that don't necessarily care about the patients but care about themselves? Like, we are going to get our asses handed to us and get yelled at by the patient, so I don't want to drop insurance because I don't want to have to be the one to collect that money.
Which is a common response.
So then what is your advice for that?
So for that, and again, this would not necessarily come in the feel it out conversation. Let me feel out my team. This would come more as we are preparing for the drop. Then I would let that team know that you have already blocked time. You've blocked training time on the schedule so that we can get prepared for this. They're going to be able to have a voice in how this is handled. They need to feel included in the process. Hey, look, I bought you this book on my favorite, nobody on the team's going to read this, but The Science of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini.
That's a hard book to read.
No, but gosh, so good. Or here, it's the shortened YouTube version of it. I've got all these resources for you in place. With this, we're not dropping for another 2 months, and look at all the preparation. So they just need to feel like you're not jumping into this without them. And you are planning time and investing in them getting ready for it.
Okay, so then for me, again, I've got you, but for the people that don't have you, then what am I doing to gather these resources? Like, what is your number one tip, or what is your...
So, podcasts to me are one of the number one things that you can do. Hopefully this podcast will be a launching point, but there's other fantastic ones. Look up Cialdini. I cannot overemphasize.
How do you spell Cialdini? Because it's a weird spelling.
C-H-I...
Is there an H in it?
Yes.
There is. Okay.
There is. No, maybe I'm
Here,
wrong.
I'll look it up while you're...
So Robert Cialdini, he's done loads and loads and loads of research and just books on persuasion and how to say things. Spend some time yourself. Is it...
So there's no H, which is why I wanted to say, because I knew there was some weird spelling. It's
C-I-A?
Yeah, C-I-A-L... like lemon, D like dog, I-N like nugget, I. Robert Cialdini, C-I-A-L-D-I-N-I.
Yes.
And you showed our team that the little YouTube one, and that was fantastic. It was short and sweet, like summary
12
point.
minutes, yep.
Yeah. And I've learned a lot about Cialdini's methods through Scheduling Institute because they go through a lot of that. And then they gave us that book, and I tried. Whew.
It's dense, and it really is. But there's plenty of other resources. So it doesn't have to be the Science of Persuasion book that you're reading. There are some good YouTube videos.
So then my recommendation then would be, I think what worked in our office was we had kind of a verbiage sheet. And like imagine the questions or even go to, like, what are y'all commonly get when a patient says, well, I don't want to pay that, or why didn't insurance? So let's create a template cheat sheet on some of the answers we give. So that way, if it's a team member that has never had to deal with that or is uncomfortable, then what are we doing? Maybe that's y'all's homework assignment. Each of you go and look up a different website to talk about, because there's so many, like you said, like so ADA probably has stuff, and ADOM, the office managers,
Office
dental,
Manager
whatever.
Academy,
Like they probably all have something. Like they're probably already cheat sheets out there, I would imagine.
I would imagine too.
That kind of say these are the most frequently, the patient's upset because now they owe a portion. How am I handling that? So gather, I guess that would be what I say to the dentist is imagine maybe pull your front desk person and say, what are the biggest things that patients are getting mad at? Type out those 5 questions, and then you go do some homework on how do you want to handle it for your office.
Mm-hmm. And giving your team time to practice those responses. So it's one thing to talk about the responses. We're real big when I'm training with your team. I'm like, we can sit here and talk about it all day, but if we're not practicing it and actually trying those responses, we're not going to feel confident in them. Then it's just all up in the head. So once we've decided on our strategy, then we need to talk about our verbiage. How are we going to say what we need to say about that strategy? And then letting your team practice. And I like short, sweet practice. So if we're like, okay, let's practice though, why do I have a balance on my cleaning question? Okay, why do I have a balance on my cleaning? Sally, go. Okay, why do I have a balance on my cleaning? Deidre, go. Why do I have a balance? And just go, back to back to back. And it gets very repetitive. People start to memorize the script, so to speak, and they start to feel more confident.
Well, and I think it's also good to see them like critique each other, because one might be, expounding off on something. The other team members are like going, don't say that. You're going to fall into this landmine. I used to do that, and that's what happened to me. Or, oh, I liked how she just said it. Can you repeat that? I'm going to write down what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of, I want to make sure we don't get off the tracks here. But looking at the team training was under our umbrella of treatment acceptance, team verbiage training. But we're talking about, we've just spent a lot of time talking about verbiage of dropping insurance. Mm-hmm. Now, can we talk a little bit about, let's assume we're not changing anything with insurance, just verbiage for treatment acceptance. What are some of your tips for that?
So for treatment acceptance, again, I would start with Cialdini, because the science of persuasion is so important in our treatment acceptance or our treatment presentation. So I would spend some time, dentist yourself, getting to know Cialdini and some of the things. And then I would start with your team training, focusing on how are we implementing their 6 principles of persuasion. How are we implementing these specifically into our treatment acceptance talk? So we're presenting a treatment plan. How are we bringing liking, which is one of the persuasion techniques? How are we bringing that in? When are we bringing that in? So I would start with persuasion first, and then I would move into practice. So if we've got these persuasive techniques and we've figured out exactly how we're going to implement those, now we move into team practice in front of everybody. And I know that sounds daunting and intimidating, but presenting a treatment plan is a pressure pot situation. We need to be able to talk about it and feel confident in a high pressure situation. So teaming your team members up, pair them up, and then have them practice back and forth. You can pull out real treatment plans from your system and go, okay, Sally, you're going to be presenting to Deidre. Go ahead. Show us how you're incorporating those laws of persuasion.
When you did that in our office not too long ago, I feel like word vomit was probably the number one thing that that came out to me, that I was surprised with some of the team members, that I was like, oh my God, why would you say all of that about this? So I guess that being aware of what your team is saying, and most likely they're saying too much. Mm-hmm. I think the other big takeaway that we saw was are they adapting what they're saying to what the patient is wanting? So looking at the patient personality type to say, like, is it the person who needs a lot of detail? If it is, then is the person presenting treatment able to give those details? If it's a patient that when reading the room, you're going, this patient doesn't need the details. They just need to move along, but you've got the team member who's going through every detail. Now they're losing the patient. So things like that to look into. I think the other thing that you recently said, I think you were in our office observing yesterday, and you sent me an email last night that said something about the order in which we're doing things is off. So, for example, people are presenting the financials before, which is so bizarre to me. Like, why are y'all doing that? We've never done that, but something is off. And so that points back to the person who is doing the treatment talks. We've trained her. She did well for a while. And then now she's like all over the place again. And I'm wondering if that has to do with a couple of things. One, she's been gone a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I think whatever momentum she gained, she kind of dropped off. Yeah. I also think the summer busyness is getting her. It's like when she only had to do 3 treatment talks, she was fine. But now she's having to do like 3 at the same time, and she is confusing herself. And now we're seeing that, which I didn't realize was going on until you sent me.
Well, and even just the order of when do we show pictures? When do we say they need something before we show them pictures? Do we show them pictures first and then that equates to, so you're going to need a crown on that tooth? It's just worth taking a deep dive into what are we currently doing, and then as we present it out in front of each other, as we're practicing it, what looks off? What sounds funny that we may not even be aware of? To me, one of my pet peeves is professional sports. I love them, but I hate them because they spend day after day after day in training for a game that entertains. We are in the medical dental field and we don't practice like that. We have patients in our chair that we are responsible for their health, and we don't train.
You pay me like how those games get paid. I'll train all day, lady. That's what I want. Not the $30 for Delta Dental.
Oh my gosh. So yes, train. Spend the time training and reevaluating the system.
So I think we're getting close on time, and we still haven't covered more playbook items. So do we want to stop here and maybe save the rest for another?
Let's save it. This, because we've listed an overwhelming amount of stuff right now. So I would say let's let our listeners chew on it, and then we'll come back and do another one.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.